everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Without further ado, we're going to get started. I believe there's lots of resonance in my presentation, previous presentation, and apparently there is some contradiction, especially when it comes to AI, with he was here yesterday, around my thoughts and perceptions about AI and its place in the gaming industry. So before we go into AI, no-code and no-code in gaming, I'll give you a little bit about me. I'm a former international and collegiate athlete. I played basketball. A couple of years ago, I raised 150K in the US for a startup that didn't do well. That's a whole nother story. But I have a charity in the UK for missing black people. It's been featured in Sky, ITV, and numerous other outlets. We work with police forces across the country. That was actually built with no code, a good real life use case. I've lectured at many universities. The one I list more consistently is the University of Jamaica. I have facilitated workshops with Ignite Accelerating in Newcastle, Chelsea Foundation in London, and many, many more. I'm very, very experienced in the no-code and low-code sector, whether you're talking about enterprise or whether you're talking about the startup and solo entrepreneur ecosystem. Let's talk about no-code and low-code. So I am sure there's many different people here, different scopes of understanding technology. So I'll give you a short description of what no-code is. So no-code is an approach to allowing you to create applications, games, voice applications. Some of you might be familiar with Wix or Squarespace when it comes to websites, using visual interfaces without writing traditional code. Low code is a very, very similar thing. If you actually use Webflow, you will understand that actually some of these platforms allow you to embed code and work with code too, but it also has the visual interface element, and this is what low code is. And I'm not going to dive too deep into this because we want to talk more about gaming, but I want to highlight what's happened over the last 20 plus years. We really had an abstraction away from the nitty-gritty mechanics of developing software, developing games, developing websites, and this is where we've come to with no-code and low-code, being able to develop it visually. This has been producing faster results. This has caused it to be cheaper. This has caused a lot of different people with different skill sets to be able to generate games, websites, mobile applications. So we start in the early beginning with logo. I'm not sure if anyone remembers logo here. And also Dreamweaver 2, moving into drag and drop. This is before the Web 2 boom. And now we're moving into the mainstream acceptance and the increased capabilities, especially when AI comes into play, when you can type a prompt and it can generate a landing page. Still very early stages, but this is kind of where we're going. Being able to develop software for very, very different use cases a lot easier. I previously mentioned, but this is one of the main takeaways. It's an abstraction away from the deeper mechanics from traditional programming. And I was in discussions with somebody yesterday, and they were scared, is no code and low code, or is AI going to replace programmers, or is it going to replace game developers in the gaming industry? And my short answer is no. I don't think any of that technology is good enough to replace any skilled expert in that particular area, but it can get you a large portion of the way. It can save you time, it can save you money, and it can allow you to focus on really specific things that make your game incredibly special. What's the impact on the gaming industry of no code and low code? What we should see is an increased diversity in storytelling. More people will be able to create different types of games from different countries, from different backgrounds, and to be able to tell different stories that really the game industry has been waiting for and consumers have been waiting for. The economic impact. As many of the developers here have mentioned, it can be very, very, very expensive to develop games, and this can actually reduce the time to develop games, but also reduce the cost of developing games, especially for indie studios. And largely innovation. And innovation is about really pushing the boundaries of what your game can do. When I mentioned about some of the synergies with the previous presentation, it was about being able to be a little bit more experimental, being able to kind of take that game jam philosophy and be able to play with some ideas a lot easier and de-risk that whole creative process. Here's an example that we haven't actually spoken about a lot. So we typically speak a lot about the traditional gaming. Now we're talking about Steam, or we're talking about PlayStation, Xbox. But what you're seeing now is a new vertical, a new category of gaming that's embedded in these social media platforms, especially where augmented reality comes into place. So what I have here is Snapchat augmented reality gaming, but obviously I'm sure you've seen Instagram and TikTok. But what's really interesting about this is they have Lens Studio. And Lens Studio is really a visual scripting platform to be able to create these really immersive experiences. I believe Snapchat is probably the most advanced in this kind of space that's combining augmented reality and gaming experiences, but TikTok is starting to innovate, and obviously Instagram and Meta are trying to do interesting things in the space too. This is one of the most interesting, and I actually have a typo here, but this is one of the most interesting platforms, Buildbox Game Engine. And Buildbox Game Engine allows you, and they actually now have text to template. It allows you to start with many different templates or create your own from scratch. It has pre-built blocks of logic to be able to create logical sequences, physics, be able to trigger animations, trigger music, and it allows you to hit the ground running when it comes to gaming and some of your ideas. It allows you to export to Windows, Mac, Android, and more really, really easily. And if you're thinking about your next game jam and something you want to explore in terms of toolset, Buildbox is a great option. And lastly, Sandbox. So I'm sure many of us are a bit hesitant about the blockchain ecosystem. But what I found really interesting with Sandbox is that they were trying to innovate in this metaverse experience. But it wasn't the experience that was the most interesting thing, it's how you create these experiences. So they had a platform that allows you to, again, visually create these experiences with predefined logic and really create interesting experiences and stories within that. I feel this is a very, very early stage for any of the blockchain-based platforms that allow you to actually create something in a day, in a weekend, in a week, in a month. But this is where we're going with some of the gaming verticals. Next, we're talking about artificial intelligence. For those that don't know, or those that might have been slightly disillusioned by the tech media or Twitter, I mean X, if you're still on that, artificial intelligence, in short, is teaching robots to do things we normally do with our own brains, like thinking, learning, and solving problems. And this becomes really interesting in the gaming industry, but also opens up many, many challenges. Artificial intelligence in gaming and different types of games is not a new phenomenon. The things I'm going to talk about in terms of the future is not new because it's really been a part of gaming, and since the beginning or early stages of artificial intelligence, what developers have done is use gaming as a platform to be able to train and teach machines, to really test machines and see how good are they at performing human-like interactions. You can see this with AlphaGo, StarCraft AI, Deep Blue. All these experiences were about pushing the limits of machines to see can they simulate human decision-making and human interactions. Generative artificial intelligence. This has been all the talk over the last couple of months, maybe a year, 2 years, because of interfaces released by particular companies. But generative artificial intelligence is a system capable of generating images, text, games, websites, and more. And it looks like, if you can notice it looks like it's actually made by humans, but sometimes it blurs the lines. One of my favorites, especially in unique gaming experience, is a game called Dungeon AI. So Dungeon AI is almost like a dynamic storytelling experience. So you're allowed to create, you start by creating your world, your characters, you might want elves in your world, you might want certain themes and certain types of storylines in your world, and then you have a conversation with this AI and you have to make decisions. So as you might see here at the top, it says you are Liam, an android living in the futuristic city of Zar. You have, and some of this is cut off, but it's telling you about the experience, and then it gives you a, what do you want to do? So you might say, hey, we're gonna go on an extreme, I want to murder this other character. And it will continue the storyline and conversation, and you just continue to have a conversation with the AI. It's really proof of concept about what you can do with storylines in AI, but it becomes very, very interesting as you start to expand the story. Scenario AI. Typically, when we talk about AI, we talk about all the user-facing stuff or the consumer-facing stuff, but a lot of the innovations in artificial intelligence is going to come in the operations and the back end and the stuff people don't typically see and interact with as much. Scenario AI was really interesting because you can train a model on your own artistic data, and it allows you to generate 2D assets based on the artistic data that you're given. Future. I previously mentioned text to template, and text to template is a way of typing a prompt that you can do in Buildbox and some other platforms, and that prompt allows you to create a template for a game. And this is something that is really interesting. I'm not sure if many of you are actively experimenting with AI, especially in conjunction with Unity, but there's a great, I wish I put in the slide, there's a great tutorial about how to actually integrate GTP3, at the time it was GTP3, I think, with Unity, and how to integrate that with NPCs. And it becomes very, very interesting with the dynamic interactions. I have a slide about the challenges and actually problems we'll probably face if this starts to get more mainstream with that. But it becomes very, very interesting. You allow dynamic interactions and really interesting interactions with NPC characters. It allows for really personalization if you choose to customize and personalize that AI experience, and it makes your NPCs a lot realer than they would be without artificial intelligence. There was a study done by InWorld, and it said 99% of gamers think AI will enhance gameplay. It says 45, 48, or 84% of gamers feel NPCs made a difference to gameplay. The repetitive dialogue was frustrating for them, and also 76% of players want more awareness and adaptive behavior in their games, which I find extremely interesting, but that also leads to some of these challenges. So when it comes to the challenges of AI, especially when I've been experimenting with NPCs and AI in Unity, is that it's so unpredictable. And it's very hard to control that interactions and what the NPC actually says back. If you're creating games, you want some flexibility, but you don't want the NPC just to be talking about any random thing and starting any random conversation. And I personally haven't found a way to put really strict guardrails on those NPCs, and I haven't seen any other creators really find ways to really define the NPC AI interaction. Limited flexibility. So we mentioned about being able to generate games with no code and low code, but actually it does come with a lot more limitations than you would with Unity or whatever other platform that you're using, and it might not suit complex and highly unique game mechanics. If you're teaching young people, or if you're just starting, or if you're experimenting with new game ideas, it can be perfect just to feel stuff out. But if you're more mature in the game development process of your specific game, it might not be what you need. And lastly, perception. There's still a stigma in the professional gaming world against games developed with no code and low code, and things are starting to change very, very slowly. But I think this is a great opportunity for us to experiment with different storylines, experiment with different stories, experiment with different experiences, and use the tools that make us the most efficient to actually do that. The key takeaways. The key takeaways for no code, low code, and AI in the gaming industry is that it should, in theory, open up more room for inclusivity, more diverse storytelling, and more opportunity for culture and different cultural perspectives to enter the gaming industry. It also highlights there is a skill set gap, and I think people have also mentioned this in the traditional gaming development, but there's a skill set gap when it comes to artificial intelligence, when it comes to no code and low code, and it's a great opportunity to try and fulfill that skill set gap. But it also brings up to question ethics, and it brings in, especially when you're talking about AI, and the ethical challenges that we're venturing into. Typically, we're talking about AI and the ethical challenges in a general place, but I think more and more we have to start speaking about it in terms of particular verticals, such as healthcare, such as finance, Does anybody have any questions?
Yep, I got about 10 minutes.
Oh, perfect.
Yep. Questions, anyone? Here we go.
Hi. You said that AI won't replace experts, but how do people expect to become experts when there's less entry-level roles, as there become roles that are suited to AI replacement? You also said that indies can use it to create content a lot cheaper, which, yeah, I agree with, but clearly those financial cuts are coming at the cost of human work, right? Also, how do you prevent it from becoming a crutch? And it's only going to create a larger skill set gap by not providing junior and entry-level roles. So,
okay, there's 4 questions. Let's tackle the first question. Can you remind me of the first question,
yes,
please?
Just that you said that AI won't replace experts, but how do people become experts when there's less entry-level roles as they are suited to AI replacement?
I think so when you're becoming an expert, you're becoming an expert with the tool set of your generation. So once upon a time, the tool set that we had was very, very different, and they kind of grew up with those tools, and they learned to complement those tools with their experiences, their process, and how they do their particular job. And I think the experts of tomorrow, or 5 years, 10 years, are going to look different to the experts of today, but the AI is not going to just replace them. AI is going to complement their actual process in its entirety. And the second question? Sure.
Any other questions? Here we go.
So you talked about AI both as a tool for writing games, but then you also talked or touched on NPC AI being more flexible, more adaptive.
Yeah.
And that was kind of making me think, well, the smarter NPCs get, the more adaptive, do we then reach a point where the game's effectively rewriting itself to best suit the player? Do you see a future in which a game stops being a shared experiences and rather something totally unique to the player? Like more and more, anything can happen, and here you and the AI are just going to make a story together.
I see that happening, but I don't see it replacing anything that we currently have. If anything, it will be more like a new vertical for people that like to play those kind of games. Like, for example, even though Dungeon AI is text-based, it's a very unique experience. And some people will like that. I actually don't mind it because I feel like this is a conversation. and some people just don't like it at all. And it's more likely to be an independent vertical than replacing everything that we currently have.
So a new genre, rather than confusing
Yeah.
it. Makes sense.
Any other questions? Here we go.
Hi, I'm Chris from London. It's a group of blind, partially sighted artists and conventional careers in the game industry. And for the last couple of years, I've been thinking about AI and the potential impact for us in terms of, for example, automating descriptions of wonderful spaces for wonderful people like this. How visually I'm building a games company powered by really powerful creative talent from design and vision communities feels more feasible now, as we always said we had an art department that was driven and led by blind artists, and honestly 2 years ago I felt I was bugging it somewhat, and while I think there are very legitimate concerns around the impact of AI developers, obviously from our perspective that's a huge new vista opening up, and I think for all of us the innovations that will come from blind and low vision artists will be immense. I guess my question is around time scales, and I sometimes do fear that there's a relatively short window of opportunity for humanity, for the humane perspective of using AI to benefit accessibility and inclusion, to establish that before it kind of runs away and subsists humanity. So I sometimes fear that we've got a very short timeline to make that happen, and therefore very much want voices like yours to reach more people and impact the development of these technologies.
Yeah, I wish I knew the timelines of like when AI is going to quote unquote take over, but I think like myself and people that I'm generally in circles with are always championing diverse voices when it comes to AI. I think the challenge we have is this challenge that we've always had in technology, is that even if you're talking about Cohere or OpenAI or Google, it's the same people that have been in these companies for 20 plus years. But I think being able to use the tools, and it can be challenging for different groups because there is a on-ramp still, there's a learning curve, but being able to use the tools is a superpower in itself. And I can turn around now, I can turn around in a weekend and start to develop and start to get the ball rolling. And because I'm someone that prefers to like do as like my almost activism, that's how I prefer my voice to be heard, rather than pleading with Google or pleading with any company to let me in. I want to build, and everyone that aligns with what I align with will come, which is generally a lot of people. There's a lot of people in lots of different communities that are waiting for the stories and waiting for the solutions and waiting for the games. We just need to build them. I'm not sure if that answers.
Yeah. I'm George Master at Dundee. My question is more about, so you talked about media perception and difficulty in uphill battles. So it kind of rings similar with, Web3's perspective or NFTs. So it's kind of this slump that I feel AI is in, where a lot of bad actors, while they're using it for, let's call it adult flavored content, or replicating loved ones' voices in emergency situations or other aspects, that gamification, I see a lot of aspects in AI that can be feasible, but I think I also see a lot of destructive capabilities that are there. So how do you think rebranding or trying to turn that ship from the current perspective you guys are in?
The problem we have, and I think this is a technology problem we have, is the companies building these technologies have to raise money, and to raise money, they're selling their technology, but but the consumers don't care about the technology. So we mentioned about blockchain. The people in the world don't care about blockchain as a technology, they cared about the benefits for their individual life. And it's the same with AI. The consumers don't care about AI as a technology, they care about how is it actually going to benefit their life. And this is the challenge. When you're looking at tech media, they're pushing the technology because it's in that vacuum of like venture capital, startups, but it should get to a point, and similar with blockchain and most technology, should get to a point where it's just about the benefits. Like even the internet today, we're not selling the technology of the internet, we're just thinking about the benefits of websites and the different things on the internet that we actually use that actually have an impact in our life. So it's about the benefits to the actual users and consumers, and the real champions of those are going to be the indie developers, the actual builders. The media is not going to push that narrative about the real benefits to people's life.
Yeah, I think just in addition to what someone was saying earlier, the feasibility to, one of our friends is working on some software that can make working as part of a law firm way easier. But the reality is that about 60% of people's jobs in the law industry. I have little difficulties around that, but that's what most people are going to experience. If you're at a desk and your creativity, let's say your decision making leads to 4 or 5 decisions in a day, that can just be done via machine learning and artificial intelligence. So these are the people that you're going to have to convince online that, hey, your game is better, or your shopping's easier, or here's some recipes, versus them losing jobs. This is kind of the hard sell you guys got when it comes to stuff.
I have a slight unpopular opinion. So, and going back to the tech media, and by the way, I don't have a real beef with tech media. It just works a particular kind of way. A lot of companies say they're laying off jobs to use AI, and I just don't think it's happening. I speak to a lot of enterprise companies. It's not happening at the scale that they say it's happening, especially letting go of a real person for the unreliability of AI where it is now. Even the best models still very unreliable, and even though it's moving fast, it's still going to be relatively unreliable for a while. I think people have the opportunity to upskill, but also the companies have to prioritize upskilling. Something I do think about, I put that timeline right, and I think this is a bigger challenge of business. As a corporation, your job is to be more productive. Your job is also to reduce costs. And when I think about technology, I think maybe this was the natural course of business before AI, before blockchain, before all of this. And I think that's probably a bigger conversation we have to have, because the goal of the business is to maximize revenue and maximize the money. So they're trying to reduce costs. And technology was always designed for that as a whole. So I think that's a bigger conversation.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to hear your approach.
All right, with that, we are out of time, so thank you again.